blue, and, you know, not that that's bad, but I mean, then, so anyway, and I was Flash Borden. My last name is Borden, so I was Flash Borden, and he was the original Rock.
Okay.
And I gave him the name, too.
Oh,
so
you did?
I get credit for that.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah, so, and then he ended up going off one way. He became the Ultimate Warrior, and I went off another way, and I became Sting, and started wrestling in big matches against Ric Flair and some of the big guys in the world title matches.
So now, all of a sudden, it's like you're being catapulted into this famous role, and all of a sudden you've got all this accolade and all of these people surrounding you. How are you handling all that, Steve?
Well, you know, I was just on the brink of getting to that point when I remember praying one time and living in Arlington, Texas, asking God, you know, if you're there, I'm not a second-generation wrestler, and I don't really have any ins here, so if you could help me, I just feel like I'm this far away from breaking it, and he answered my prayer, and then all of a sudden I was wrestling in these big matches, and how was I handling it? It was, I thought that I had finally reached, you know, success.
Yeah.
Reached the, you know, the top.
Yeah,
so.
the top echelon. This is what people live for.
Yeah.
To get to this place, right?
Right. And I can walk through the airports and people know who I am now.
Yeah. Well, when we come back, we're going to find out how Steve Borden became one of the most famous wrestlers of all time. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
You get that first phone call, and it tugs at your heart, and you go before the Father, and you pray for that person. There's a sense of fulfillment. There's a sense of knowing that you've done God's will for that person, for that phone call. And it really, really blesses me, and I know that it blesses the people.
The natural solution to the problems facing men and women due to hormonal imbalance is available now. 3 revolutionary products designed to not only alleviate but end our suffering. For women, Pro Help and Menopause Cream is readily absorbed through the skin, completely natural and specifically designed to reduce the symptoms of everything from PMS and menopause to osteoporosis and depression. For men, it is our Pro-Men formula, which naturally combats the declining levels of testosterone, contributing to a host of medical and emotional disorders. Order these groundbreaking natural alternatives to dangerous synthetic hormones for you or your loved one today. Call the number on your screen and begin living the life you were meant to live. It could be just the thing that keeps you from suffering tomorrow.
Weekday mornings on Daystar. Tune in and start off right with Randy Morrison at 5:30.
We all want to go somewhere in life. That's why we are here.
Joni Lamb at 6. Joyce Meyer at 6:30. James Robison at 7. And Andrew Womack at 7:30.
Break out of that box!
Brighten your day with wisdom and insight that will encourage you to grow in the things of God.
When we say what God says, it has more power than we could ever imagine.
Tune in every weekday morning right here on Daystar.
Sting was all but worshipped by those who faithfully watch wrestling. As our clip showed, his fans were blown away. But was his life on the inside as successful as what the fans saw on the outside? What about that, Steve? Here you are, you're being catapulted to, you know, the top level there as far as the wrestling world is concerned. And you're all of a sudden, lots of money, lots of fame, lots of notoriety. Like you said, go to the airport, everybody recognizes you. How are you handling that? On the outside, everything looks good. What's happening on the inside?
Yeah, I was like a time bomb ready to go off. Every part of my life was beginning to just sort of get out of control. 2 boys, my 2 sons at home, my wife, my career and the choices that I was making while on the road. It was just, everything was out of control. And so when wrestling fans saw me rappelling out of a helicopter in Panama City or the United Center in Chicago and doing all the cool stuff with the baseball bat and beating up all the bad guys, my life was a wreck. And I reached the point, because of that lack of control over every area in my life, that I just reached just a deep, dark despair.
You know, one of the things that my producer told me as she was reading your book is that the thing that struck her in this process, and we know that even as you were away from the Lord, that the hand of the Lord was upon you.
Yes.
And but that you had a conscience, and that you would maybe do things or go places or see things or interact in situations where you would then leave the situation and feel bad and think, you know, I really shouldn't have done that. It's like you had a conscience through all of this.
Yeah, I did. And even some of the choices that, you know, the storyline in wrestling and the things that we did, you know, and I chose not to go down a certain path, and I chose to go down this path because I did have enough in me that I knew that there were kids that were watching me, and I had a huge young audience out there worldwide, not to mention my own 2 sons at home. And it really, you know, God started to work in different ways through that, because I remember one time doing one of our shows with the baseball bat and Hulk Hogan and Hall and Nash and all these guys, and these were my ideas, to have somebody, a dummy, rappel out of the ceiling and crash through the ring. And I talked to my wife after the show, and she said, you're going to have to talk to your son, Garrett, because he's very upset. He thought that it was you, and he thought that you were hurt. And then he saw, you know, Hulk and all the guys laughing and, you know, making fun. And it just, those were one of the moments that I just thought, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
This is, I mean, it's not just my son. It's all these people watching worldwide, you know. I mean, we're deceiving these people. So God was starting to work.
So when you don't really have, you know, the Word of God is the book that we look at. It's God's spoken word to us that we live our lives by. And when you don't have a moral compass and guidelines to live by, and you're offered all the things that the world has to offer, within yourself, you really can't control those urges and getting involved in things that you shouldn't have. I mean, we've seen it with some of the most famous sports stars.
Right.
You think, well, they have everything. And Marcus, he told me one time, he said that the message, you could title the message, The Insanity of Sin, because it leads to such darkness and despair and emptiness and loneliness.
Yes.
What about that?
And the deception that comes with that, you know, it's like a spider that weaves its web around you, and you know, it's all around 4 sides, but you still have enough room to move around in there, and it just, then there's another one that goes across this way, and another one's a little closer, and pretty soon one day you wake up and you realize, what has happened? I mean, this is not right. What the world calls success, what I was after, what I thought would bring me happiness, it just doesn't work. It ends up being totally empty.
You know, there have been a lot of tragic stories even here lately as far as wrestlers and their lives ending earlier than what maybe God intended.
Right.
You know, it's so wonderful to see you sitting here and knowing that as a result of you accepting Jesus, that you have continued destiny and purpose, and that you really have real meaning now.
Yes.
Much more so than you did when you were in that ring with all of those millions of fans.
That's
do you
right.
feel that way?
Oh, yeah. I definitely do. And I've had people tell me, and pastors tell me, that, you know, God's going to use me to affect more people for His kingdom than I ever did in wrestling. And that's how big God is, because we're talking 40 million people a week were watching me, you know, in the end there. But
let's talk about the night that you really came to the end of yourself. I mean, you know, sometimes, I don't know what it is, some of us have to go to the bottom and hit the bottom before we'll really look up. And that happened to you, didn't it, Steve?
Yeah, there's a scene in the movie, it's the dream sequence, and I did not actually have a dream like that. The dream was symbolic of my life at the time. And you know, for me, it was being confronted by my wife when she had asked a point-blank question about my lifestyle on the road all those years with all the fame and fortune, and I could no longer lie to her. I was the best liar until that moment, and I believe God was in me already, but could not blossom through me because I wouldn't allow him. I was still going to live life the way I wanted to